Welcome back. In this session, I'm going to be going over subassemblies. Why are they used and what are the advantages of using a subassembly? For example, I have this Desteco clamp open. This is part of your exercise 7 folder. So look in the files folder for exercise number 7 to open this exercise up. Now, if you look to the left side, you're going to notice that this assembly contains 3 assemblies as well as a couple parts over here. So it's not just an assembly that has to do with parts, but it has 3 assemblies that are part of it. As you can see, if I just go over the sub-assemblies, it will highlight the entire assembly for me in a little orange box. As I go over every one of them, it highlights it in a bigger box. If I go over any of the parts, it just highlights the parts in a little orange box. Okay. Also, next to the sub-assemblies, as you can see on the left side over here, there's something that looks like a traffic light. It actually looks exactly like this symbol right here, which is the rebuild symbol. Because this assembly is movable, for example, I can take this handle, left click and hold it and move it up and down to simulate the clamping mechanism. The button over here looks like a traffic light, which is the rebuild button. So to get that to go away, all I have to do is click the rebuild and it goes away. This is just telling you that you've moved that part from your original assembly. If I go ahead and remove it again, you're going to also notice that it comes right back over here, both parts that moved, and it will ask to be rebuilt. I can sit here and rebuild it again real quick. Okay, you can also notice whenever I click on any object, it opens up the entire tree for it and goes straight to the part, and it highlights the part that I have selected. Okay, so what are subassemblies? Subassemblies, like I said before, they're original assemblies. So this entire assembly, for example, let's go over the front end right here. So when I click on the front end assembly, it highlights all the parts that are assembled together. Okay, now this assembly I've created already on its own, by itself. So I've created this assembly, I've created this assembly, and I've created this assembly all separate. And then what I've done is I've came back and I created an assembly and combined all of them together. Now what is the advantage of that? The advantage of that is that I can come here, bring 3 assemblies together and mate them really quickly with each other, rather than bringing all the parts into here and mate them all together into one section. Now the disadvantages of bringing a lot of parts in and mating them into one section, that then whenever you change something or you add 2 parts to make an assembly together, which I will show you how to do that a little bit later, the mates get affected and you'll get a lot of errors either with mating or other features that has to do with it. But the biggest, best advantage for creating an assembly, a sub-assembly within an assembly, is that you're able to create these sub-assemblies and bring them in with minimal amount of mates. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of parts over here that are mated together. This is made out of a whole bunch of parts, almost about 12 parts if I remember correctly. And if I open up the mates, okay, now these mates have to do with every single one of those. Now the mates are dragged in here by the sub-assembly. Now because of these sub-assemblies, I have the mates that are part of them. So some of these sub-assemblies, a lot of these assemblies are because they're done within the assemblies. For example, from here on up, all of these over here are done with the sub-assemblies separate. The ones from here on out, okay, the ones that have to do with the screws basically, are done within this assembly itself. So really the only mates I've done within this assembly are placing these 4 screws and mating them to the parts that are located over here. So those are the only mates that I've created in here, which made my life easier when I've created the assembly. Now, one thing about sub-assemblies is that I can actually separate the sub-assembly and into parts. For example, if I open up this front assembly right here, okay, and I highlight these brackets, for example, I'm going to highlight all of these brackets, 1, 2, 3, and 4, everything basically that's part of this, and I drag these outside over here. Okay, I'm gonna drag them a little bit down here. Okay, so I'm gonna drag them down here over a part. You're gonna see that symbol that looks like interchangeable parts. Make sure that you drag it over either a part or an area that does not have to do with the assemblies. As you can see, I can drag parts that are within one assembly into part of another assembly. So I can make 2 assemblies into one assembly, or I can take parts from one assembly and separate them and place them into parts. For example, right now, my front assembly, if I go over it, it doesn't highlight anything because I've taken all the parts that are part of that assembly and I placed them in here. As you can see now, this expanded into multiple parts. Now, if I want to go back, I'm gonna have to highlight every single one by holding Control and selecting each of these parts that were part of this assembly. So these are all for example, and then I come over here and I hold this and I drag them all the way down until I see the in interchangeable parts, and I let go over here. Now all of those are back into this assembly folder. You can see it over here. It's an assembly tree, part of the front assembly again. So that's something that's a really nice feature to use. You can basically take a lot of parts that are not connected together, and then you can place them into one assembly. Another thing you can do is actually take, for example, I'm gonna take these parts again. Okay, I'm gonna highlight them all. You can right click on these parts, or let's drag them over here again. Let's drag them back to outside over here again. Okay, now let's go ahead and select them again. I'm gonna select all of these parts that are part of that assembly, and then what I'm gonna do is right click over here, and then I'm gonna expand it. You're not gonna see it, it's at the bottom of the screen. I'm just gonna expand it, and then you're gonna come over here and click Form New Assembly here, and click on Form New Assembly. And all of a sudden, a new assembly, it's called Assembly 11 over here. Now remember, the front assembly now has nothing in it because we took all the parts from it, but then we formed another assembly. Now it calls it Assembly 11 until I save my part. If I save my part over here, for example, I'm gonna come over here and click on Save, Save All. It's gonna ask me save the part internally or externally for the subassembly. Okay, and I'm gonna, if I save it externally, what Solidworks will do is we'll take all the parts over here and we'll create an assembly, just like we create an assembly over here. We'll create an assembly separate from the assembly over here into its own subassembly, or it will create this subassembly basically virtually inside of the assembly. So we'll keep the subassembly within this assembly. Let's go ahead and just create a internally, because we've never done that before, and click on OK. Now, right now I'm gonna have a subassembly within this assembly. So this is only located within this assembly. It's not going to be in your files folder. If you would have saved it externally, it would have been its own assembly in the file, wherever you saved it, basically, in whatever folder you saved it in. But because I saved it internally in this part, it does not become a separate entity. For example, if I take this one over here and I open it up, open assembly, well, right now I'm not going to see anything because I took all the parts from it and move them out of here. But let's go ahead and do this for the handle assembly. You're gonna notice that I'm gonna just click on OK to update it. You're gonna notice that this assembly is all on its own and it's saved as a handle assembly. Okay, I'm gonna close out of this, click on OK. Now if I click on assembly 11 and open assembly, there you go. You're gonna see that it says assembly 11 and part of the Destaco clamp. So that means all of this is part of the Destaco clamp. And I can actually save this. So I can come back and save this and save this as if I wanted to. And I will say over here is being referred to by other open document as a virtual component. Save as will replace these references with a new name and convert them to normal components. Click Save to continue. And what you'll do is you'll basically save this as a separate assembly that you can actually open up later. Right now you can't open this up later because it's saved within the assembly on its own. So those are some very nice features that are part of the subassembly forms, and like I said, there's a multiple very nice uses for the subassembly. In our next chapter we're going to learn more about folders and what folders are used for.